Today, we're going to be talking about emotional self-regulation. When we talk about emotional self-regulation, it helps for me to think about it this way. I pretend that I have a pet, and it's a grouchy ape. And this ape is pretty cool. It can do some cool stuff. Like, he's pretty smart, he's creative, he can be funny sometimes. He's like a pretty cool ape. But also, between you and me, he's kind of a hothouse flower, so, he likes sleeping like 8 hours a night, and he really dislikes staring at a computer screen for like 2 or 3 hours in a row, which is really inconvenient for me because I need the ape to do a lot of computer work, so it's not convenient for me that he doesn't like doing that. I can force him to do the things that I want him to. I can force him to not get enough sleep. I can force him to sit at the computer. But if I do that, he's going to act out. So I can force him to sit at the computer for 2 or 3 hours, but I can't force him to be productive. And he'll find nice little ways to squander that time. Or if I don't let him sleep enough, he'll be grumpy and ruin things around me. The essence of emotional health, so the essence of emotional self-regulation is emotional health. And the essence of emotional health is treating yourself the same way that you would treat a beloved pet. Like, if you had a dog and you locked it up in your room all day and you never took it for walks and you fed it horrible food and you didn't give it love and affection, like, of course that dog is going to act out, right? And you are the same way, that you need certain things to have emotional health. So feed your ape well, take it out to play, give it lots of love and affection, just like you would for a pet that you really care about. You need to treat yourself in the same way. When I was younger, I was all about willpower. I thought I could just will myself to do anything. Like whatever behavior I wanted to see in myself, exercise, studying, work, like I could just force myself to do it through willpower. The problem with that is that it is exhausting. And yes, you can do that for a limited period of time. You can do that in the short run, but it starts to wear you down after a while. As I've gotten older, I start to focus less on forcing myself to do things, less on relying on willpower to get things done, and instead I focus more on creating the right conditions for me to do things. A farmer cannot make wheat grow, right? A farmer cannot make their crops grow. All a farmer can do is till the field and plant the seeds and water them and care for them and create the right conditions for growth. And that's how I think about my relationship with myself, that I cannot force myself to do things, but what I can do is create the right conditions so that I'm able to do the things that really are important and meaningful to me. And that's essentially when we talk about emotional self-regulation, the foundation of emotional health is treating yourself well, is giving yourself the things that you need to be happy. And this isn't the same as self-indulgence, right? That if you feed your dog treats all the time and let it just sit around and lay around all day and do nothing, that's not treating your dog well either. That's not treating your pet well either. And so treating yourself well doesn't mean being indulgent with yourself. It means understanding what you need to be healthy and then having the discipline and the thoughtfulness to provide those things for yourself. So what are those things? The first one is sleep. Sleep is the biggest predictor of mood on a day-to-day basis. And we know that. If I want to put you in a really bad mood, all I have to do is not let you get any sleep. And on the other hand, if you're in a really bad mood and you get an opportunity to sleep for 10, 12 hours, that often puts you in a very good mood, right? And so sleep is the best thing you can do, the easiest thing you can do to improve your emotional health, and it's free, it's accessible all of the time, right? So make sure you get enough sleep. Next thing is exercise. Exercise is incredibly important for emotional health. I think you're supposed to get like at least 20 minutes of cardio 3 times a week. That'd be like a minimum. But even that can have a huge impact on your emotional health and well-being. I mean, just like your pet dog or whatever, we are animals and we need to get out and be active. We need to use our bodies, and exercise is how we do that and how we create that emotional health. You also need to interact with people that love and respect you. We often, in American culture especially, we have this idea that we're going to have our own self-image, our own self-esteem that is independent from the opinions of anyone else about us, right? That we don't care what other people think about us. We only care what we think about ourselves. That's just not how humans work. So much of our self-esteem, our self-image is based upon the people around us, the people that we interact with. And that's not a bad thing. That just means that we have to be very thoughtful about making sure that we hang out with people that see the best in us, that appreciate the best in us. And, several times a week to spend a meaningful amount of time and have meaningful connections with people that enjoy our company as well. Another thing that we need to do in order to be happy is play. It just like there was a point in my life, especially in like grad school, where it just felt like every single minute of my day was devoted in some way to self-improvement or trying to get ahead in school, at work, whatever it was. If I took 1 minute to not be productive, then I would feel really guilty about that. And it creeps into my hobbies too. So I got into rock climbing. I was into rock climbing in grad school, and it's not enough to go out and rock climb and have fun. It's like, oh, I got to get better at rock climbing. I got to get better at rock climbing, and that ends up ruining it, right? And then I get into martial arts, and I really enjoyed martial arts, and it was the same thing. Like, oh, you got to get better. You got to get better, and it ruins it. And when I say play, what I mean is this activities that have no goal, that the purpose of the activity is the activity. You're not trying to build yourself up into anything better. You're not trying to be successful for some materialistic reason. That the purpose of the activity is the activity. And that doesn't mean that you can't, like I play ukulele now and I really enjoy playing ukulele, and I obviously try to get better at it, try to learn songs, but my ego isn't tied up in it. If I have a busy week and I don't play ukulele a lot, I'm not like, mad at myself for not learning a new chord or whatever it is. That it's like, I do it because I enjoy it and only for the sake of enjoying it. And I like learning new things with it because I like learning new things, but I'm not gonna critique or judge myself for not learning enough on ukulele, which is an activity specifically designed to be playful, to be fun. So you have to have activities like this, unstructured activity in your life. Our brains, our minds just need to have fun sometimes. One of the best things you can do for emotional health is put away your phone. We spend so much time on our phone. Like, our minds need time to do nothing sometimes, and that used to naturally occur in our life while we were sitting at a red light, while we're waiting in line at a grocery store, while we're waiting for class to begin. We used to just have moments of nothingness in our life where our mind could wander. But smartphones have taken that away completely, right? That there are no moments, no little brief pauses in your life for reflection, because always in your pocket you have access to this little world that you've created that's unique to you, right? What's going on in your smartphone, no one else has that same thing. And that's kind of the irony of social media, that it's like social media and yet it's very individualistic. But you get sucked up into your phone, and it's just it's meaningless. Like, it occupies your mind with just meaningless. It's like eating Twinkies. Like, there's no nutritional value to it. You're occupying yourself, but in this way that is just utterly devoid of purpose or benefit. I heard someone say this. I was hanging out with someone and their phone rang, and she was just like, "Shut up, phone! You ain't the boss of me." And I it's true that like we act like our phones are our bosses, right? We get a text message and it's like, oh, I have to answer that now. We get an email, I have to answer that now. Social media notification, it's like our phone is constantly demanding our attention. That is not the relationship you're supposed to have with your phone, right? Your phone is a tool that you use for your purposes. You don't exist for the sake of the phone. The phone exists for the sake of you. One thing I started doing is I got a key holder like this for my place. And when I come in the door, I put my keys on it, which is great because I don't lose my keys all the time. And then I put my cell phone there. And if I need to use my phone, then yeah, I'll get up and go get it. But just that psychological freedom of not constantly having my phone at my side has been such a relief. Like I didn't realize the extent to which my phone was always kind of occupying my attention until I got rid of it. And now the phone's there if I need it, if I choose to use it. I'm not there to react to the phone. The phone is there to react to me. All right, so all that stuff that we just talked about, getting enough sleep, exercise, play, meaningful social connections, all of that is like your emotional climate. And if you do all of those things, you can create a positive emotional climate where basically the day-to-day is pretty positive, is pretty good. Now, even if you have an amazing emotional climate, even if you've done a great job creating an emotional world for yourself where it's pretty positive on a day-to-day basis, you're still going to have these storms of emotion, right? And that's fine. That's natural. That's good. That's like how the system is supposed to be functioning. So the first thing you need to do is create a climate, but then we also need to know how to handle those storms in a way that is the most effective or adaptive or healthy for what we're trying to accomplish. And that's what we're going to talk about next. All right, so we're going to use this little structure that I like here. And on the left side of the screen, that line with the little heart rate monitor at the bottom, that's physiological arousal. So when we're talking about emotions, we're talking about feelings, right? Your body reacts. And so that line is the intensity of how much your body is reacting. And then the horizontal line across the bottom, that's time, okay? So we're going to see our emotional reaction over time. And what happens is when something happens, when a situation happens, we have a strong emotional response to it, that physiological arousal spikes up. And the first thing we want to do is just recognize that, is just be aware that we're having an emotion. The next thing we want to do is focus on relaxing, trying to bring that emotional reaction down a little bit. When it gets down to a low enough point, then we want to distract ourselves from the emotion, and that will help the physiological arousal continue to drop. And then after it's gone to almost back to baseline or close to baseline, that's when we start to actually problem solve and think about whatever issue that we're having. So we're going to go through each of these in detail, starting with recognize. So the first thing we want to do when we're having a powerful emotional experience is just to recognize that and to kind of admit that to ourselves. And I know that seems really obvious, but this is why last week we started out talking about emotional self-awareness. That the very first step to dealing with your emotions is being aware of them. One time I was driving to a party with a girl that I was dating at the time, and we were getting a fight over something. I can't even remember. It was something stupid, right? And we're like talking, and she's like, why is this making you so angry? And I'm sitting there and I've got my hands wrapped around the steering wheel where like my knuckles are like bright white, right? And my jaw is clenched and my eyes are narrowed and I'm talking like this and I'm like, I am not angry, right? Which is like obviously ridiculous. I was angry, but I don't like being angry. And I especially don't like being angry at the people that are close to me, the people that I love. And so I was having this very powerful emotional reaction, but I genuinely wasn't even aware of it myself. I didn't want to be aware of it, right? So the very first thing you need to do when you're having an emotional reaction, a powerful emotional experience, is just to say, whoa, okay, we're getting a little angry here, or we're getting very sad, or these things. And to realize that when we are under the influence, when we are under the spell of an emotion, that's going to influence the way we think, and our behaviors, and to say to ourselves like, whoa, okay, I'm pretty angry right now. let's just, take into account that A, this will pass. Emotions tend to pass pretty quickly within a few minutes, and that I should be careful about what I say or do during that time. It really helps to be empathic with yourself. Powerful emotions are often very unpleasant, right? Like it doesn't feel good to be really angry. It doesn't feel good to be really anxious or to be really scared or really sad. And the first thing we need to do is to have empathy for ourselves of like, oh, okay, you're kind of in pain here. That your emotional experience is unpleasant. So like something happened in the world around you and that already sucks, and then on top of that we have this unpleasant emotional reaction to that thing, and that sucks even more. And that alone of just being like, whoa, okay, this is unpleasant, like it sucks that I have to go through this right now, and to have a little empathy for yourself can be one of the most powerful ways to bring that emotion down almost immediately. All right, so we have an emotional spike. The first thing we do is recognize that we are experiencing that emotion. The next thing we do is we want to relax. We want to bring that physiological reaction down a little bit. There's a lot of different ways to relax and to kind of curtail that really powerful, immediate emotional reaction. One thing you can do is you can often just leave the situation. In movies and in television, I would always see like characters like, go to the bathroom and splash cold water on their face when they were really emotional. And that always seemed really stupid to me. And then I tried it, and it's a really effective way to kind of calm yourself down. And so if you're in a situation where you're really upset, and if you could just take, a minute to sneak off to the bathroom and splash some cold water to your face, that can really help bring you down pretty quickly. We'll also, in class, I'll show you guys how to do progressive muscle relaxation. So this is basically like you just focus on different parts of your body and on relaxing the muscles, kind of going all the way through your body. And that can also be very effective for helping you relax. Another thing you can do is focus on your breath. So we'll also do this activity in class as well, where we'll do some mindfulness of breathing and just paying attention to the feeling of the breath going through our nostrils. That can help calm us down. It's just it's rhythmic, it's relaxing. We can feel our lungs kind of swelling and going down and swelling and going down. And it's like being comforted almost when you pay attention to your breath. So those are some different techniques to help you relax. One of the things that I find really helpful is to have a poker face, where we have this fear that we're wearing our emotions on our sleeve, right? That when we're having this powerful emotional reaction, everyone can just instantly see this on us. And that's not true. For those of you that I had in business communication, you remember that you'd get up to give a presentation and you would be so nervous, but the audience didn't see that. They weren't able to see that nervousness. And so we often feel like we're being transparent with our emotions. And we have the ability to kind of develop this kind of flat affect, this stoniness, this poker face, where when we're dealing, especially with the first 2 or 3 minutes of a powerful emotional reaction, that we can kind of put on this face and nobody on the outside knows what's going on with us. So I would highly encourage you to develop a poker face. And to make it almost a reaction, that as soon as you have this powerful emotional reaction in a place where maybe you don't feel comfortable being emotionally expressive, that you're able to put on this poker face and start doing some relaxation techniques and take control. Okay, so we have this emotional reaction. The first thing we do is recognize that we're having it. The next thing we do is we try to relax and bring that physiological response down. Once we've gotten that kind of initial, really powerful physiological response, once we've brought that down a little bit, the next thing we want to do is distract ourselves from the emotion. All right, and I know distracting ourselves from the emotion seems maybe unhealthy or counterintuitive, but let me explain, and I think you'll see why. So what often happens is that we'll have a really powerful emotional reaction to something, and then we'll calm down. We'll get into the yellow zone. We'll relax a little bit. That initial first few minutes of the emotional reaction will pass, and we'll start to feel better. And then we'll start thinking about the situation again, right? Or thinking about the people that wronged us, thinking about whatever happened. And boop, our physiological reaction spikes. Okay, and then we get really uncomfortable again. We have that same really powerful emotion. And then finally we get through it and we end up relaxing down again into the yellow zone. And then we start thinking again about all of, the situation, whatever it is, and our emotion spikes. And this happens over and over and over, right? Where we don't allow ourselves to fully relax. That every time we start to relax a little bit, we just turn over in our head whatever just happened, and we cause ourselves to get emotional again and again and again. And we get in this cycle where we're never able to fully go back down to baseline, and it's exhausting. It's a really unpleasant and exhausting cycle to be in. This is called rumination. Rumination is when you're thinking about something over and over and over again. We're going to talk about problem solving next. Problem solving is good. Problem solving is when you look at the situation and you ask yourself, like, what am I going to do to improve this situation? Rumination is when you're just thinking about it for the sake of doing it. And we all do this, right? We'll be taking a shower and we'll be replaying an argument in our head in the shower, just like over and over again, and changing what we say, like, oh, this would have been a slightly better comeback. This would have been slightly more like powerful, or whatever it is. And we'll just go over the conversation over and over and over again. That's rumination, and that is really, it's a very unhealthy way to deal with our emotions, because they continue on and on and on. What helps me understand this a lot, and someone told this to me once, and it was just like eye-opening. Human beings did not evolve to be happy. We evolved to want to be happy, and there is a big difference that we actually, as a species, we don't particularly like being happy. We're always chasing after happiness, but we don't like to catch it and sit inside that happiness. And nothing epitomizes this more to me than a mosquito bite. Like there's some pleasure in having a mosquito bite and scratching it, right? Like we like to have a problem that we can kind of like work on, even though scratching it, of course, makes it worse. Even though we're bringing ourselves pain or irritation, whatever it is, that we there's this pleasure in scratching that mosquito bite. That is the exact same thing that rumination is. Rumination is scratching the emotional mosquito bite. Just in the same way that scratching a mosquito bite isn't good for it, ruminating is not a healthy way to deal with emotions. So, because we didn't evolve to be happy, we evolved to want to be happy, we have to override that evolutionary desire to want to be happy. And we need to consciously choose to appreciate the positive things in our life, and to pivot away from a mindset of wanting to be happy to appreciating the things that we already have that do make us happy. Instead of wanting new things or wanting changes to make our lives happy, to see what we have here and now that we can be happy about. But we have to consciously kind of override our evolutionary development in order to do that. One of the problems we have is that the human mind does not do things very well. It's very hard not to think about something. The human mind is a thinking machine, and when you tell it not to think about something, it doesn't handle that very well. Like right now, if I were to tell you not to think about polar bears, the first thing you think about is polar bears. And so often, when we're in really powerful or really unpleasant emotional situations, or we have these problems, we'll be ruminating, we'll be thinking about them over and over and over again, and in our minds we'll be like, okay, just stop. I can't think about this anymore. I can't think about this anymore. Like, it's exhausting, it's unpleasant, whatever it is. And then 2 seconds later, we're thinking about it again, right? Because we cannot tell ourselves not to think about something. What we can do is shift the focus of our attention. So the mind is a thought-producing machine, we can't turn it off, but we can give it other things to think about. So if I tell you to think about giraffes right now, you're thinking about giraffes, and you're probably not thinking about polar bears. And so this is exactly what we have to do when we're ruminating about an emotional problem. It's not enough to tell ourselves to quit ruminating about it. We have to give ourselves something else to think about. We have to give it that thought-creating machine that is our mind. We have to give it something else to create thoughts about. One example of this, which I think is really cool, is they've done a few studies showing that playing Tetris can reduce PTSD. And I know this seems like totally unrelated, but one of the causes of PTSD is that people just have incredibly intense memories of their traumatic experiences, and these memories bubble up in everyday life. And so they have nightmares all the time. They overreact to, noises or situations where there really isn't danger, because these memories are so intense. And one of the reasons those memories are so intense is that people ruminate. When you have a traumatic experience, you think about it over and over and over again. And just like studying note cards over and over and over again helps you remember something, thinking about that traumatic experience over and over and over again, it burns that memory into your mind in a really powerful way. And so in the military, they started trying that after someone was in a traumatic experience, combat, whatever it is, the first thing they would do is, physically once they were okay, is they would give them a Game Boy with Tetris to play. And because they were focusing on playing Tetris, because that was occupying their mind, they couldn't do this rumination. They couldn't rehearse the traumatic experience over and over and over again. And so by giving them Tetris, by taking their focus away from the traumatic experience and ruminating on it, they're able to minimize how powerful those memories are. And that helps lessen the symptoms going forward as well. So this ability to distract yourself from what you're ruminating about is really, really powerful. Okay, so you need to consciously challenge your own rumination. If you're ruminating about something embarrassing that you did, think about the people that love and respect you. You have good memories of something you did where you were proud, where you felt charming or socially suave, right? And so conjure up that memory. Your mind wants to think about something. It's thinking about how you embarrassed yourself. Don't think about that. Think about times where you did the opposite of that, times where you felt really socially adept. Call those memories up to your mind, and that will help push out the rumination. If you're ruminating about a mistake you made, say you screwed up, I do this, right? I screw up at work and I'll be trying to go to bed at night and I'm just oh God, what if my coworkers find out about that? What if my supervisor finds out about that? It's going to be the end of the world, right? Where I'm just obsessing over a mistake I made. So if that's what you're ruminating about, instead consciously try to think about an accomplishment you're particularly proud of. What's a time where you felt really smart or competent? What's something that you accomplished that you're really happy about? And let your mind think on that instead of ruminating about the thing you're embarrassed of. If you're ruminating about someone you're angry at, think about the quality you most appreciate about them. And this is by far the most difficult one to do. It's also one of the most powerful and effective ones to do. We often get most angry at the people that are closest to us in our life, right? Our family, our significant others, our friends. They're the people that make us the most angry because we're closest to them. And when we're angry with our friends and family, we tend to see them in extremes, right? We see them as kind of all black or all white, where they're just these pure evil people with pure evil intentions, and they're utterly and completely wrong about whatever thing we're arguing about. And they're bad people on top of that as well, right? You can challenge that by thinking of what are the good qualities? What are the things that you like about this person? Why is this person in your life? Why did you bring them into your life? What do you get out of that that's good? And that almost immediately diffuses this absolutist thinking, this idea that they're all bad, when you can remind yourself of the good qualities of that person. It is one of the most difficult things to do. You don't want to think about people's good qualities when you're so angry at them. But if you can teach yourself to do that, if you can develop that level of discipline, it's one of the most effective ways to diffuse anger, and also it's really helpful for getting over and avoiding conflict, because instead of coming at people like, oh, I hate you and you're totally wrong, you're coming at people from a more balanced perspective, like you're a good person who did a bad thing. There is a specific type of rumination associated with depression that has 3 specific characteristics. The rumination is global, which means that you think that everything in your life is ruined. It's internal, which means that you think that it's your own fault. And it's stable, which means that you think that the situation will never change. And you can understand why people are depressed when they think that their entire life is over, it's their fault, and things will never get better. Global means that you think that everything is ruined. You think that every facet of your life has been destroyed by this event, whatever has happened, whatever you're having an emotional reaction to. So maybe you failed a midterm, and now you're like, oh, I failed that midterm, I'm going to fail the class, I'm going to lose my scholarship, I'm going to get kicked out of Dominican, my girlfriend's going to leave me, I'm going to wind up panhandling in the streets under a freeway overpass, right? Like my entire life is going to fall apart because of this one series of, or because of this one event. That's what global rumination means. To counter global thinking and global rumination, think about what in your life is going well. Most of us live multifaceted lives. We have friends, we have family, we have hobbies, we have school, we have work. One of those things hopefully is going well. Even if all the other ones are going horribly, at least we have one thing that we can point to and say, this part of my life is actually going pretty well. If the emotional problem you're having is not related to your health, then I strongly recommend health is the thing you can always be grateful for. And, you know, I'm not like old, but I'm getting older, and I just realized how much I took for granted how great it is to have a body that allows me to do the things that I want to do on a day-to-day basis and that feels healthy and good. So if you're really upset about something and you have your health, I mean, at least think about your health. That's always something you can point to that's going right in your life, except when it's not. Internal rumination means that you think everything is your fault. So you failed this test because you're stupid, because you're lazy, because you have bad time management skills, and you blame yourself for whatever thing has happened. And there's something, it's almost as if there's something broken or permanently wrong with you. To challenge this, think about the aspects of the situation that were beyond your control. So maybe the professor wasn't that good, and that's why you failed the midterm. Or maybe you got a great professor, but they wrote a bad test and you studied for the wrong thing. And maybe you studied really hard, but you just happened to study the wrong content. Maybe you stayed up all night the night before because your friend was having a problem that you were helping them with. Maybe you're balancing work and school and you just didn't have time to study for the test. Think about what were the factors of the situation beyond your control that contributed to whatever's going on now. And then lastly, stable rumination means that you think this thing is going to last forever. So global means my whole life is screwed up. Internal means it's my fault, and then stable means it's always going to be like this, that you know, I'm never going to be able to have the job I want because I failed this midterm. I'm never going to be able to buy a house or have a family or accomplish my goals because I screwed up on this midterm. That's what stable means. It's that I have permanently ruined my life in some way. Even though most of us feel like our problems are just so incredibly important at the time, in hindsight, they're often not. And so to challenge stable thinking, ask yourself if you're going to remember this problem in a year. And most of the time, you're not. In fact, most of the time, in a few weeks, you probably won't even remember or care. And our problems seem so big to us, but when we see them within the perspective of time, we get a broader perspective on them, and they don't seem as big. We see them, you know, as more smaller and more temporary. So to challenge a stable rumination, ask yourself, am I going to remember this in a year? All right, so we have an emotional reaction. We want to recognize that. We want to relax to bring ourselves down, our physiological response. We want to bring that down. Once it gets down to a more comfortable level, Then we want to distract ourselves from the emotion for long enough that we can get our baseline down, or get our emotional reaction back down to baseline. And then finally, when we're in a more thoughtful, reasonable, composed state, then we want to start trying to problem solve, thinking about how are we actually going to address this situation. So some different ways to problem solve. Talk the situation over with someone you trust. This doesn't necessarily mean getting advice. Most of us don't actually like to get advice, but we do like to vent about our problems. And what's really helpful is when other people don't try to tell us what they would do in the situation, but when other people help us figure out what we want to do in the situation. And that's what good therapists are supposed to do, right? They don't give you answers. They help you come up with an answer. And that's what your friend should ideally help you do as well. Not to tell you what you should do or what they would do, but to help you figure out how you can best handle the situation. Something else that can be really helpful is to imagine yourself in the third person. This also is really helpful before you make stupid decisions. So, like, imagine if your friend came to you and described the situation to you. What advice would you give to them? What would you think about their behavior? What do you think they should do? Yeah, I mean, literally, imagine one of your friends coming to you and describing the exact same situation that you're having. What would you tell them to do? And then, is that helpful for you? Can you take that, the advice that you would give, can you take that yourself and apply it to your own situation? Thinking of ourselves in the third person gives us just a little bit more objectivity and helps us make better decisions. And of course, please use the social and emotional skills that you learn in this course. So you guys have learned listening. That's a great way to deal with problems that you're having, especially with other people. Listening is a great problem-solving tool. We've talked about using feedback to deal with social problems, behavioral problems with the people around you. We're going to talk about persuasion and connection. And so all of the, or we'll talk about emotional, social regulation later in the semester as well. So these are all skills about how to problem solve the social problems that you're having with the people around you, and use them. They're very effective. Okay, so we have an emotional reaction. Our physiology spikes up. The first thing we want to do is just recognize that that's happening. Then we want to relax and bring our physiological response down a little bit. Once we get a little more comfortable, then we're going to distract ourselves from the problem for a while. And then again, when we get closer to baseline, we get more composed, then we want to pivot to actually trying to solve whatever problem we're having. This process is cyclical, it's not linear, so it's not like you're going to have an emotional reaction, you're going to recognize it, you're going to relax, you're going to distract yourself, and then you're going to problem solve, and then it's over. It's usually something like you have an emotional reaction, you recognize it, you relax, you try to distract yourself, it doesn't work, and so you have a really powerful emotional reaction again, you get really upset again, you relax, you distract, you start thinking, you start trying to problem solve and thinking about the problem, and then you get really angry or whatever else. Again, your emotion comes back, and so you got to go through that process over and over and over. That it's not just this linear A, B, C, D. It's A, B, A, D, A, like it's the cyclical process where you have to deal with your emotions, relax, distract yourself, and problem solve. I kind of think of emotional self-control like cleaning a toilet. The first time you clean a toilet, it's like really disgusting and unpleasant, and you're like, I can't even make myself do this. And then after years and years of cleaning toilets, it's only slightly awful. That's what emotional self-control it's like. When you first start doing it, it seems impossible. It is so unpleasant to try to talk yourself down from a powerful emotion, to try to think of something pleasant about someone you're really angry about. That's a difficult thing to do. To challenge our perceptions of situations is a difficult, effortful, unpleasant thing to do. And at first, when you're first trying to learn this, it seems so impossible that you can't imagine yourself doing it. And then after years and years of practice, it only becomes slightly it's only slightly bad. It's only slightly awful. It never, I mean, at least for me, it's never become easy. It's never become fun, but I have gotten a lot better at it, and it has become less bad, certainly with time. And, you know, I got another 30, 40 years to practice, so who knows? So why are we doing this? If emotional self-control is never going to be any more pleasant than cleaning a toilet, why are we doing it? If it's such a difficult and unenjoyable thing to do, why are we going to do it? We're doing it because it's worth it, because it beats the alternative. When you practice emotional self-control, it helps you ask people for what you need, which is an incredibly important thing for success in life. It helps you avoid fights with the people you love, which again is very important. It helps you gain a powerful advantage when you're competing with people. And I'm using competition in a very broad way here, but like when you want something done and someone wants to prevent you from doing that, when you're having a discussion with someone and you see them lose their cool, when they get really angry or upset or whatever it is, that is an immediate advantage that you have over them because they're no longer thinking straight, right? As soon as the emotions click in, their mind clicks off. And so if you're able to stay cool at the same time that your adversary loses their cool, you have immediately gained an advantage on them. And that's what trash talking is about, right? If you ever play sports, people trash talk each other, and it's the idea of I'm going to upset you, and that's going to throw off your game. So the ability to stay cool is a huge advantage when you're competing with people. And then lastly, having this level of emotional self-control helps you influence the emotions of others. And when we talk about what leadership is influence, and especially it's the influencing of people's motivations and desires, right? And harnessing those things to what you think needs to be done. And so again, it's just an incredibly valuable and useful tool to be able to influence the emotion of other people, and emotional self-control helps you do that.